Hi, I'm Lori Peterson, and on behalf of Whole Foods Magazine, welcome to this webinar on how we deal the inside scoop on minimum advertised price. We will be fielding questions throughout the webinar, so please don't be shy about taking the opportunity to ask some. Your mics are all muted, but you can use the chat box on the right of the screen, or better yet, use the question symbol, the question field, to type in questions, and we'll be answering them throughout the course of the webinar. Minimized advertised price, or MAP, is not new, but it is increasingly a topic of concern as more customers go online to price shop. And we've gathered a panel who have MAP experience, and they agreed to share their knowledge and passion for this topic with you. Special thanks to Buried Treasure for making this webinar possible. If anyone chooses to tweet live, please use the hashtag WFMAP18. Okay, now I would like to introduce our presenters. First, we have our retailers. Ed Jones is the owner of Nutrition World, which is a store in Chattanooga with approximately 5,000 square feet of selling space and 10,000 square feet if you include his wellness center. He employs 26 people. Chase Ballard is the general manager of Nutrition World. He's been there about 10 years, and Chase has been compiling information for nutritionproductsinsider.com, and you'll learn more about that in a little bit. Taylor Hamilton is the owner of Tunie's, which is a store in Florida, 15,000 square feet. He employs 35 and has owned the store since 2010. And Tunie's also has a side agency which helps brands to deal with their e-commerce businesses, and that's called Recommerce. Lester Burks, in the center of the bottom row, is the CEO of Lifeline Foods, which is a manufacturer of Buried Treasure. And Lester is also the president of SEMPA and has worked closely with both Ed and Chase to learn more about the whole process of MAP and become somewhat evangelized and really a driving force behind getting this message out. And finally, we have with us an attorney, Daren Garcia, who works daily on issues related to MAP, and he will be joining us at a later time. He'll be joining us towards the end of the conversation, where we'll get into a lot of the perhaps legal questions that you might have. So please, once again, do use this opportunity to send in some questions through the question field, because it's really great that we've got these people who are living and breathing and succeeding in the use of MAP, who have agreed to spend their time with us. Okay, so why is Whole Foods doing this webinar? Well, we're getting a lot of questions from you, our readers, and the outpouring of registrations told us that, we had hit a nerve here. Retailers are asking, how do I have the conversation with my manufacturers? Manufacturers are asking, how do I comply? And our goal, our mission is always to educate and inform. So we thought this was a great opportunity to bring these folks together and to bring these issues out into the open. And to begin a dialogue we expect will continue well past this webinar. By the way, the webinar will be recorded, so it will be available to you through WholeFoodsMagazine.com, and so you can take notes, but don't worry if you miss a point, because you'll have an opportunity to listen to it again and share it with your staff. Okay, and now let's hear from Lester Burks. Lester, I have a question for you. What is the single most important thing you believe manufacturers need to understand about supporting retailers on MAP?
Manufacturers need to understand that independent natural product retailers are the incubators and nurturers of our industry. We have to support, as manufacturers, our independent natural product retailers. If we don't, in 10 years, there will not be independent natural products retailers. And in 20 years, this industry will not be recognizable because they won't be in existence. So MAP is the first step that every manufacturer needs to be taking.
Okay, thank you. We'll be reaching back out to you in a little bit. Okay, now, Taylor, you've been working with manufacturers successfully for several years now on their MAP policies, and what do you think is the most important factor to making it a win-win?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, and I think the first step is that the manufacturers have to have a genuine commitment to get serious about developing a MAP policy, and oftentimes that really starts with developing a commitment to educate themselves about the mechanics of this new e-commerce marketplace that has really come out of nowhere over the course of the past 5 to 10 years. And manufacturers, in my experience, genuinely want to help and want to support brick and mortar retailers, but they don't necessarily always know how. And so some of what we've seen over the past several years is that the majority of sales that take place in our in e-commerce, the majority of sales that take place are still driven through, for vitamin companies, still driven through brick and mortar stores by a ratio of about 85% to 15%. And so although e-commerce is certainly up and coming, it's not necessarily driving sales for large manufacturers, maybe the way that they think it is. And so because of that, the retailers are really still doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of, they're taking the inventory risk to bring their products in, they're training their employees and their staff, they're building displays in the store, and they're really responsible for a lot of the real demand creation that exists in our marketplace. And the e-commerce channel, even though it represents roughly 15% or so of the sales, it's influencing pricing for 100% of the sales channel, because obviously it's so easy for customers to take a look on their phone before they're purchasing something at a brick and mortar store. So I think the first step for manufacturers really is to get serious about learning about MAP policies. But I believe that for the most part, that manufacturers genuinely do want to help brick and mortar stores.
Okay, what's the ratio of success that you've had with MAP as a retailer?
I think it's increasing. It's definitely getting better. It's very high for the partners that we work with through Recommerce. I mean, there is a program out there that works that we've had a lot of success with, and there's really no need for manufacturers to go out there and try to reinvent the wheel. And if you put a program in place that's tested, that you can experience success. Introducing a MAP policy, supporting your brick and mortar partners, and gaining more control over your sales through the e-commerce channels, and it's really a win-win-win for everybody. So we've had an extremely high success rate.
Okay, Ed, you've been actively talking to manufacturers for about 3 years, right? Am I right there? About MAP?
Well, I think the correct word is actively, but we've been speaking to manufacturers for almost 8+ years, because we started sensing about 8 years ago this shadow that's coming over the industry.
Okay.
Now, once we started speaking to them, of course, the initial conversations were pretty much carbon copy, which is either we're not going to be interested in MAP policies, or the general consensus was we're trying, and every time we stop one, another one crops up. That kind of conversation continued to grow with the years. And it became very frustrating for myself, and also because Chase was going along with me on this ride, that it didn't seem sensible, because almost anything can be addressed if you become educated enough and you have the intent to do it. But they didn't seem to have the intent. And so, we've kind of put together something that hopefully is pushing a little bit more of the envelope of seriousness of this intent, the website that we established, NPI.
Okay, Chase, can you tell us a little bit about MPI? Because I believe you're the one who's been doing a lot of the legwork in setting that up.
Certainly, yeah. MPI, Nutrition Products Insider, it's products with an S.com. We set it up about probably 6 months ago, maybe even a year ago now, but it is basically just to start, it's a data compilation center where we have a compiler report that shows Amazon's pricing of a lot of leading brands. And then we've also got brand updates for multiple different manufacturers on there. So you can actually click on a brand. We have a ton listed, and it'll tell you what their MAP policy is, some commentary if we've had some discussions with those companies, and kind of you can see a little bit of if they're working on getting a MAP, if they're not interested in a MAP, or some different comments that they've been making.
And that's a free service that you're making available to people? It
is free. And today we just actually launched a free ebook as well. If you go to the nutritionproductsinsider.com, it's about a 19-page document that's free to download. It's at the top of the screen there. And some of the stuff we'll be getting into today is straight out of that ebook.
Okay, so walk us through. How do I start?
Yeah, certainly. So a little bit more context on what Ed was saying. We were talking with brands, and everybody was kind of just dragging their feet or weren't taking it seriously. And so we decided to put our foot down, well, figuratively, but we still decided to start acting because no one else was. So this is a very basic overview of what we kind of started doing. And like I mentioned already, the ebook on there actually has our full list of how we started taking a stand and enforcing MAP on our own end. But yeah, basically step one is really just learning. Most people on here right now are already doing that. You're attending a webinar, you're trying to educate yourself on what MAP is, what it means, what are the ins and outs. So you're already doing that first step, so pat yourself on the back for that. But you can log on to our website again, and we have our little report that actually can help you see some of the pricing that's going on Amazon right now. Now, all the retailers are more than aware probably of the Amazon pricing, because they probably see all the time their customers looking at their phones and then probably putting an item back and then walking out of the store. And then I know we've done it in the past where we'll go and we'll look on Amazon and be like, wow, they're selling it for our wholesale price. So anyway, so discover what brands have great MAP, what brands aren't really doing great in the MAP department at the moment. And then moving to step two, open up lines of communication with manufacturers. You've got to talk to the right people. Your sales reps and your brokers, they can only do so much. So make sure to ask them for a contact information for the people that have the power to make decisions excuse me, regarding online pricing. The next step, step three, there is where it starts to get a little bit more heavy lifting. We ask the retailers to actually formulate their own MAP policy. So the companies, the manufacturers, are always coming out with their MAPs and enforcing it or not. So we decided to come up with our own MAP policy about 2 years ago. And our MAP policy basically stated that we will, beginning in 2018, we will only partner with brands that enforce a MAP of 30% or better off MSRP. We sent that out to our manufacturers and basically gave them about a year to comply, and a lot of people really stepped up and started making changes, which was really refreshing, and then a few didn't. The percentage approach may not be the best approach for everybody, but it's really just review that, and if you want to ask questions, if you're free to email me or Ed and ask us how we kind of went about that. But you definitely need to have some sort of map policy or some sort of map stance for your store. After we sent all those out to manufacturers, we gave them a lot of time to comply. We had a lot of great conversations, some negative conversations, but eventually you'll need to have a timeline in there. Well, actually, a few things you need to have in your map. You'll need to have why you're doing it, what are your new guidelines, what are the implications of not acting. So if the company doesn't have a map, what are those implications? And then how long do companies have to actually act? So once you've kind of met your time standards that you have in your map, in step 4, it's time to start taking some action. So you want to act small at first, and with all your actions, you're really, it's not like we're not wanting to end partnerships. Every action you take should be in efforts to get the manufacturers to listen to you, because that's at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest issues is retailers feel like their voice isn't heard on map. So in every action you're doing, you're wanting your voice to be heard. You're wanting the manufacturer to listen. So act small at first, take their shelf placements, give them a lower shelf placement. Don't give them as many facings. Discontinue some co-op partnerships, limit in-store promotions. So there's a number of little small acts you can do before you ever even have to consider cutting any products. Step 5 is whenever those actions, the small ones, don't really do much and no one really is listening, even after you've made the small steps. That's when, you have to take a stand. If it means cutting some items, cut some items. If it means postponing partnerships that you've had for decades, postpone those partnerships. It's not easy, but it's really refreshing what we've saw happen, because all these steps, Nutrition World, Ed and I, we have went through all of them. And I would say about 90% of the companies, once we started cutting a few products, came and met with us, flew their executives in, and remedied our concerns, and now have fantastic MAP policies, or are working towards getting fantastic MAP policies. And again, that's really the goal of all this, is keeping those partnerships strong, reminding the manufacturer that we do matter. And a lot of manufacturers know that. They're just needing the boost to act. So, but then after you've started acting and standing and held your positions, and again, there's a ton more information in the ebook. I know this is very, very overview, but if you want to know more about how we actually ended up having to cut 30% of our inventory to start seeing a difference. If you want to see how all that unfolded, you can ask questions here, obviously, or download that free ebook at our website. But the real important thing is just to stay on company, stay vigilant, and make sure that you are staying true to your MAP policy that you form for your store.
Okay, we have a question. Someone's asking, could you please post the website here? If you look at this screen, nutritionproductsinsider.com is the website that is being referred to, and we have the URL at the end of the presentation, and we have all of the email addresses of the participants if you want to follow up with some more detailed questions. One question that has come in is, please explain the difference between UPP and MAP. Is that something that you can address, Chase?
I may not be able to answer the question fully, but the way I handle it, I've only dealt with UPP. Honestly, it just came up the other day with a brand, and for the time being, I'm addressing it as a MAP policy. I have not fully educated myself on it, though, so I may be speaking in some ignorance there.
Yeah, so UPP, this is Daren Garcia. UPP is unilateral pricing policy, or uniform pricing policy, is actually another way to refer to typically as something called a minimum resale price policy. So whereas MAP relates to minimum advertised price policy, so advertised price being the key there. UPP typically refers to actual resale price. That's the difference.
Okay, thank you, Daren. Ed, how did the cuts that you made impact your sales?
Well, I will be.
Sorry,
I will be honest with you. When Chase and I discussed it, he had a lot more guts about it than I did. I was very fearful that we would have a backlash of customers who just simply walked out of the store and would not come back. So it took a lot for me to embrace this. But actually, before I get totally into that, I don't know, and I know all the people listening are certainly aware of the devastation of uncontrolled pricing. But just like Jeff Bezos today or yesterday released his shareholder letter, and it's basically said that 100 million Prime memberships have been sold. That means 100 million people have paid $99 in order to be a member of Amazon. And now, over this year alone, 50% of all their sales are through resellers. That is devastation for this industry as far as a private, small to medium nutrition stores will be, as Lester says, a thing of the past if we don't get control of this. It's like, where did all the camera shops go to and the Radio Shacks? Both of those were companies that needed to educate the public, but they did not have any control over pricing. But as far as nutrition world, we had a few customers who were very displeased. And when I say few, I actually mean, I don't know, maybe less than 50. We did have to educate our staff on how to verbalize why these changes have occurred and work very closely with the customer to try to help them find a similar product. But somewhere around about 4 years ago, when a customer came into Nutrition World and actually had bought several items off of a 30% promo end cap, and she was an older lady, and when she came back the next day and demanded her money back, and we were clueless, she said, "You guys are ripping the public off because I can buy this for 50% off on Amazon. I got 30% off here, and I will never shop at your store again." She just happened to be outspoken. We're going to have a ton of people who just simply won't come back if we look like criminals to the public. I feel so confident today with our selection of product and the fact that I now don't feel a slight resentment about spending 15 minutes with a customer, because so often it was starting to get to where, well, that would be the last time I would see them because I advised them, and then they would use it and go on until they needed more advice. I don't worry anymore about that. As long as you're close, you're going to be okay. But when it's 50% off and we're selling for 15 off, it's not close, and we will be devastated if we don't control this.
And I'll quickly clarify a little bit more about that. That 30% inventory cut in the ebook, you'll see there's a lot of planning that goes into cuts. The 30% was mostly items that were duplicates of other companies that we already carried that did have a MAP policy, and they were considered non-essential SKUs. And there's a very detailed layout of how you want to cut your products, and we go into all of that. But the sales were fine.
Could you just give us a top line, on the first thing you looked at for deciding what to cut?
Yeah. What we would do is we pulled up, we basically ran a report with our retail solutions company that we use. And we put a filter in saying, here's all the brands that don't have a MAP policy. And it spit out a report. And then we had our managers and some of our floor staff go through and say, okay, what SKUs do we not need anymore because we already have something else? I mean, how many arginines or vitamin C's does everybody have out there? There's multitudes. So we just started cutting those items that were duplicates. But once you start looking around, there's a good bit of those things out there. But sales were not impacted very much. We actually we maintained our double-digit growth from the year before, and we're still 5% up in customers and sales for the year as well.
Okay. Do you rate or score suppliers in MPI, or do you just list the information?
Not
Chase?
we do that. That's something we do. That's kind of some of our secret sauce at Nutrition World. But we don't post that on MPI, no. But we do show MAP policies, and we do show if they're complying or not. But at Nutrition World, I do encourage all companies to have a manufacturer or brand rating scorecard. But we do not post that to MPI now.
Okay. Taylor, there's a question. What exactly is Recommerce?
Recommerce is a brand agency that was built really to help manufacturers navigate the complicated e-commerce world that exists out there. So we help manufacturers. We provide a host of services to manufacturers around gaining control of their brand through the e-commerce channels. And in turn, that can provide support for their brick and mortar partners as well once they gain control of their brand.
Okay.
So we work with manufacturers to on content to implement and execute MAP policies and different types of agreements as well. But again, with the Recommerce was really born out of I had this very similar experience I think that Ed and Chase have had, where I've been talking with manufacturers for years, and there really was very little movement in the way of introducing any type of a meaningful MAP policy. And what I came to was that manufacturers really didn't understand how to do it, and so we kind of took it upon ourselves to learn about this and to help develop a program with the goal ultimately of helping manufacturers support their brick and mortar partners, because we still believe very strongly that brick and mortars are the key to sustainable long-term growth for manufacturers, and that if manufacturers do not have some type of a healthy mix between their brick and mortar and their e-commerce sales, that they're going to experience challenges with growing in the future, because so many stores, Tunie's included, and just like Nutrition World, are really starting to they're starting to do a competitive price analysis as part of their category review process, and then allocate shelf space according to which brands and which manufacturers have MAP policies in place, because again, the retailers are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this relationship, and they believe that it's fair, that they should be able to make a fair margin on those products. And so manufacturers are starting to experience, in my opinion, what retailers are really starting to curate their selections to feature the manufacturers that are in turn supporting them.
Okay. Do any of you have experience working with manufacturers who go through distributors? That's a different scenario. Chase?
To be honest, there's not a lot of we don't really have a lot of supplement companies that go really through distributors. There's one, I won't mention their name. They have been dragging their feet for a while on MAP, but they did actually just announce a UPP, and that was as of about a month ago. And that's when, as I stated earlier, that was my first time hearing really the term UPP. I'm excited they are taking action. I'm excited they are finally stepping up and supporting the retailers through a MAP style policy at least. And hopefully we'll see some good successes with that. But really, I don't have too many distributor brands that we work with other than that one.
I can comment. I can comment on that briefly. We do work with several manufacturers that are in distribution, and while that definitely introduces another level of complexity into the kind of the MAP equation here, it is possible again to achieve success if you're a manufacturer and if you're in distribution. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, this is just Daren Garcia. I would echo that. I mean, we represent over 200 companies in this precise area, and I'd say probably over 25 nutritional supplement companies, all of which sell through distribution. And so I would echo the past comments that with the right strategy, it's entirely possible.
Lester, do you have something to add from the perspective of a manufacturer about distribution?
As a manufacturer, I have I've sold through distribution. We have about a 50-50 sales ratio through distribution. Yes, it is complicated, but it is very well done, as very much able to be done. You can take care of distribution and direct sales. It's something that we take commitment on the manufacturer's part to stick with it and be willing to go the course no matter what.
Okay, Lester, there is a question that I think is a good question for you to answer, which is, as a manufacturer, how do you enforce MAP in the marketplace?
Well, a minimum advertised pricing is what we request every retailer, e-retailer, and across the board to everyone to not advertise below that pricing. And we do several different things, from working with lawyers all the way to on a daily basis looking at and going over every e-retailer in the country that's retailing our products and make sure that they're sticking close to MAP policy. If you don't have that commitment, you're going to have a problem. And enforcing it it's really hard to enforce, but it can be done. I mean, we turned our pricing around, online pricing around. It took us about 6 months, but we went from having hundreds of people selling products at, like Ed said, 50 to 60% off, to people that are violating our MAP policy to maybe once or twice a week. That's a huge difference, but it took a lot of commitment, a lot of work.
Okay, thank you. Taylor, do you have something to add to that?
No, I think that Lester summed it up pretty well.
Great, thank you. Okay, the most commonly asked question that we received prior to the webinar was, how can I enforce MAP policy and still be in compliance with state laws? And we've had a few other questions come in during the webinar relating to concerns about antitrust and things like that. So we're turning this one over to Daren, the attorney, to answer.
Sure. So it's a good question, and one that everybody needs to be very thoughtful about when implementing these policies. I mean, a lot of people are taking things off the shelf and thinking, oh, I'll just tailor this to my company. And some very kind of basic benchmark things to remember. And anybody can email me, but there's a ton of resources on our firm's microsite in this area called onlinesellerinforcement.com. There are white papers, there are how to avoid antitrust risk, et cetera. But some very basic things. MAP, minimum advertised price policy. So that right there, you need to be mindful of various things. And just to state it up front, MAP policies are legal at the federal level and legal in all states. Okay, so what is illegal in several states is things called minimum resale price agreements. So vertical agreements relating to actual retail price or resale price. So that's what is illegal in several states, legal at the federal level. So with MAP, what you want to do to make sure that you don't drift inadvertently into that resale price agreement bucket is to make your MAP policy just that, a unilateral policy set by the brand owner that states unilaterally the minimum advertised price for its products. And that needs to be unilateral. It needs to not be negotiated. There's no agreements relating to MAP. It is just that, the unilateral policy of the company that's communicated. And then what's difficult for many companies is it has to be enforced consistently. So for example, if you have a MAP policy and you have a big strategic account and you have some small mom and pop shops, you need to enforce your MAP consistently against the big strategic account and the small player. And you can't pick and choose favorites. And you can't say, oh, I'm not going to penalize my big customer, but hold my little customer to a higher standard. You need to train your salespeople very carefully to not go in and tell their customers, hey, you're below MAP. If you raise your price up, we'll be okay. Because when that happens, now all of a sudden there's an argument that you've created an agreement relating to price. So again, MAP is unilateral. It is a policy. It relates only to advertised price. And the issuer of the MAP policy does not seek any type of agreement, consent, or anything like that to adhere to MAP. So with that, you don't have an agreement, and you're not touching actual resale price, which ought to be at the discretion of the retailer. And if you follow those basic guidelines, you're going to be, 80% of the way there.
Thank you. We've got a lawyer in the room answering questions for no cost. Are you going to let this opportunity go by? I'm speaking to the audience, not to you, Daren. He's here for another 24 minutes, so please do ask questions if you have more.
Well, let me tack on something since the question about UPP came up. So unilateral pricing policy, which effectively means as a brand you say, I will only do business with you if you sell. It is my policy that I will only do business with you if you sell my products at this minimum price. And that is stronger than MAP, okay? But it is also more risky. So for a company implementing a UPP, or otherwise referred to as a minimum resale price policy, MRP, you want to, for example, not have tiered enforcement. So a lot of MAP policies say if you violate the first time, we'll send you a letter. The second time, we may stop shipping you for a couple weeks. The third time, we may cut you off. If you're in the UPP world and that's appealing to you, you have to have the stomach, at least we would counsel you that you need to have the stomach to terminate on the first strike, because otherwise you're already talking about resale price as opposed to advertised price. And now it just becomes too easy to go out and tell somebody, hey, you violated our UPP or MRP, whatever you call it, and you need to get your price up. And that person says, okay, now you've arguably created an agreement relating to resale price, which again can be illegal in several states. So, if you have things like a UPP or interested in MRP, UPP, it just requires a lot more commitment to training and commitment to being willing to cut off offenders, at a first strike level.
One of the things, this is Lester, one of the things that we at Berry Treasure and Lifeline Foods had to recognize early on, that we had to have the stomach and fortitude to decline POs from clients, big POs from clients that didn't want to comply. That's a hard pill to swallow for some manufacturers, but it pays off in the end.
Okay, we've got a question for Daren. From a legal perspective, what are some of the most costly mistakes manufacturers make when implementing a MAP policy?
Well, a lot of manufacturers kind of view MAP as kind of a panacea. A lot of companies are out there saying, hey, if you just put in a MAP policy and use my software, all your problems will be solved. And the fact is that to have MAP success, you need a holistic strategy. Somebody asked about marketplaces. So for example, if you're a manufacturer and you are selling, let's say, to a marketplace, and you're also selling to into distribution, and you don't have tight controls in your sales channels, you're going to have probably, particularly in this space, a lot of unauthorized sellers, anonymous sellers on marketplaces selling your products. And the data would show that typically 53% or more of unauthorized sellers, so people who you don't know who they are selling your stuff online, will violate your MAP policy. And compounding the issue is the fact that you don't have a direct relationship with those people. So you can have your MAP policy and you can go out to them and say, send a message through the Amazon portal or whatever, say, you're violating my MAP policy. And that seller's going to say, yeah, I know I am. I don't have your MAP policy. I don't care what it is. And when you're in that situation and you're out there and you're facing those unauthorized sellers, yet you have your good customers who want to adhere to MAP but can't because they're chasing these unauthorized, and yet you try to hold them to it, they become very angry and say, how can you try to hold me to a MAP policy when we got all these people selling on marketplaces and they're killing me? And that, for most manufacturers, that is the death of their MAP program. So you need to have a strategy to deal with the unauthorized sellers. Then secondly would be manufacturers that are out there and enforcing MAP inconsistently. So penalizing small players and kind of looking the other way with their big customers. And that is just very risky from a legal perspective, particularly as a lot of companies become more sophisticated about this stuff. And then thirdly, I would say is manufacturers who have not properly trained sales staff and whatnot. And given their practice, maybe not the letter of their MAP policy, but given their practice, they are maybe unwittingly in the realm of resale price agreements, which get very dicey from an antitrust perspective, at least in several states. So those will be kind of the three kind of main pitfalls of MAP programs.
Okay. It's so
Lester, this is Taylor. I have a question. I was hoping you could speak to the feedback that you've received from some of your brick and mortar partners since you introduced your MAP policy and stabilized your pricing, and how has that impacted your sales? Now that I'm assuming you have visibility as to what sales are moving through the brick and mortar channel through the e-commerce channels.
Well, as I travel around the country, Taylor, what got me into this was Ed, and I travel all over the country from coast to coast, visiting stores with my reps, and I saw a tremendous need for what we're doing. As I stabilized the MAP pricing, I actually had retailers calling and saying, hey, we appreciate what you're doing. We can see that you care. We see that you are changing. They actually were following online, looking up my product's pricing without me coaching them, just following it. Most manufacturers don't realize how savvy good retailers are out there. Independent retailers are struggling, and we have to support them, and they will support you back. My sales have gone up. My brand loyalty has gone up, and the integrity of my brand, what's perceived integrity, has also gone up. So it's almost insane that I didn't do this as a manufacturer earlier.
If I can add to that, this is Ed. What I have realized is the importance of us to back these manufacturers like Lester. To me, it's insulting if we stock brands who want their cake and eat it too, and really don't have any intent or goal of helping the retailer on our level. And it's just greed. And I have been in this business for almost 4 decades. And some of these manufacturers are like my family. Now, when I say that, many of that is the rep connection, not so much the inside core of the company. But we've built loyalty because we've gone through this journey together. And I've had to put some of that aside because, it's just not fair if they don't see the bigger picture. And what Lester's speaking about the retailers need to know that we can't take this lightly because they're busting their butt. They are losing money initially, and we need to reward them with loyalty and not just pat them on the back. We need to eliminate the brands or reduce the brands that are cutting our throat and stopping our future. And we need to partner with brands like Lester and all the others and let them know by our sales and our devotion. And lastly, it's been incredible how much more service we are getting from the manufacturers that have now embraced MAP policies, because they see the future and what it and service is a huge part of that. And so they have upped their game with better co-ops and more visits and more trainings, and everything I could have ever wanted as far as a partnership has come about. And because of us taking a stance on this MAP, and because of the manufacturers finally getting it, some of them. Now, I will say in Anaheim, I had 4 different discussions with 4 different companies who I didn't even know what to say to them when they said, it's not worth our effort, it's not important, it's not this, it's not that. And I'm sitting there saying, you want us to be trained, and you want us to educate all these consumers and know that they're going to walk out and order it? That's arrogant of you. And they just, the few of them didn't get it. But I think we have definitely turned the corner. We got a ton of people like Lester that are wise and smart and who want to bulletproof the future of this industry.
Okay, I just want to, there's some more questions that are coming in from the audience, and I want to see if we can address them as much as we can. What do you suggest manufacturers do about their distributors who are not willing to adhere to the manufacturer's MAP policies? For example, not ceasing sales to e-commerce retailers who frequently undercut prices.
Well, I mean, as a brand, you have 2 choices, really. Well, 3, I guess. One would be to stop doing business with the distributor. 2 would be to not have a MAP program. Or 3 would be something, perhaps taking a step back from MAP and having like an MSRP program. So you don't have an official policy, you set MSRP, and then as a company, you can make the choice internally just who to cut off and who not. But those are basically your 3 options.
Okay, we've got a question for Daren. What would be the next step to take when an Amazon seller refuses to comply with MAP?
So again, MAP with an Amazon seller is not that's why all MAP programs fail. It's easy to deal with your authorized sellers. You know who they are. You can stop shipping them. You can cut them off. You can do all sorts of things. With the unauthorized Amazon sellers, you don't know where they're getting your product. You don't know who they are. So there's no business lever that you can pull. So you have to have some other legal basis to go after them. And what we advise companies on is how to shut down those third-party unauthorized sellers. And we typically do it by helping the companies create a foundation that will, help support the levying of a trademark claim against those unauthorized sellers. Because you have no other recourse, you need to be able to say that unauthorized seller is selling a materially different product, either in terms of the quality controls associated with the product or material benefits offered with the product. Again, this is somebody selling legit product, not counterfeit, which is a whole other story. So this is just an unauthorized seller breaking MAP. You have to have the appropriate legal foundation to be able to target them because you have no other recourse.
Okay, we have a question. As an independent retailer, is 30% off MRSP limit a good expectation for us? You want to start, Chase?
Yeah, I think that's where we decided to land our MAP at, and I've talked with a few other retailers, and typically that seems to be a fair point. And that's what we were really seeking for. Is, if we're honest with ourselves, e-commerce is not going anywhere, and nor should it really. It's created a lot of convenience and efficiency for our culture and the way we live life. And so it is here to stay. And companies can be online, and that's fine. But the biggest issue is fair pricing for all. And so now here at Nutrition World, we do a 20% off kind of membership card. So we're allowing brands to do 10% deeper than that. Because, if a customer's in our store and we're giving them great service and they can get it for a few dollars cheaper on Amazon, they're typically fine buying it in the store and have and thank us for it. And because we're giving them great service, we're educating them, and they're partnering with them on their health journey. So 30% works great for us. I think it's fair for the manufacturer. I think it's fair for the consumer, and it's fair for the retailer.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
Lori, as a manufacturer, I really respect Chase's decision to do 30, but as I went around the country, Chase and Ed have a tremendous commitment to service in their store, and I see stores that are working to do that, but they don't have it. I committed to only do a 20% MAP because it makes it so these stores, these independent natural product retailers that are struggling out there, I feel that 20% makes it so they have a better margin and are able to step up into this competitive market that they're in, where they can't even see their competitors, only online. So I feel like, to me, 20% was a number that would not only sustain the independent natural product retailer, but to help them move into the new era that we're going to.
Yeah, and to further on with that, Lester, we agree. Like 20%, you definitely have a bigger tip of the cap in our book for sure. And we love seeing 20%. We love seeing 25s and things like that, and 15s. But and that's what our map is. Our map is a hard line at 30. So once 30 is hit, that's where we say, if your map's lower than 30, we don't recognize it as a map. And so that's what our 30 really stands for.
We have a comment from one of the audience members. As a manufacturer, we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy about our IMAP policy. No sales greater than 15% off MSRP for all online sales. Manufacturers must use all resources possible in order to weed out the bad apples. It only takes 1 penny off on eBay or Amazon for one seller to hurt your other clients who follow your MAP or internet MAP rules. Eventually, we all want to be honest doing business with each other. Okay, let's see. We've got some more questions. This one is for Daren. Legally, is it appropriate to cease sales to distributors that refuse to discontinue sales to unauthorized e-commerce retailers who do not adhere to MAP?
Yes. I mean, you are permitted as a company under legal doctrine going back 100 years to choose with whom you wish to do business as a company. And so if you have a distributor that refuses to follow your policies, then you are within your rights. I mean, setting aside, any contractual provisions to the contrary, you are, in a vacuum, well within your rights to terminate that relationship.
Okay, follow-up question. What actual steps can a brand with MAP take to identify unauthorized sellers who are violating? This has to do with the frustration the authorized sellers have when they're up against the unauthorized, unidentified sellers who are violating.
Yeah, so, I mean, as a law firm, and we have, a top-notch cyber investigation team that specializes in uncovering those identities. And even if, the team that we have, and it's very sophisticated in terms of the databases they have access to, the investigative tools, the tactics, like, for example, there are resources available. You can see every screen name any seller used, and sometimes the first name that they used in history was legit because this wasn't as shady of a practice at its nascent stages, or if they're selling internationally where you can't hide information, if they're selling non-FBA, some items at least. And there are all different sorts of tactics that our internal team does, but at the end of the day, we can also issue a subpoena to the marketplaces for the seller identity. I mean, that obviously can only be done through a law firm. And when you have the appropriate legal foundation, you say, hey, these people are violating my trademarks for these reasons, and I need their identity because I have legal claims against them. So you can get them that way.
Taylor, do you have anything to add to that from what
Yeah,
Recommerce
I agree
does?
with everything that Daren says. There's a process. I think most important takeaway from from this webinar, if I was a manufacturer, would be that there is a process that you want to go through to implement a strategy that has proven to be successful with other manufacturers in the past in order to introduce your map policy into the marketplace. And if you don't, you're either in or you're out, but it's a very dangerous place to be in the middle, where you said, you know what, I want to have a map policy, but I don't really want that policy to have teeth. I'm not really going to enforce it. I'm not really going to develop a strategy to implement that map policy successfully. I think that is a much more dangerous and detrimental place for a manufacturer to be, rather than just having not having a map policy altogether. And so there are programs in place, like Daren is talking about, we utilize at Recommerce to implement a strategy that has been proven successful in the past. But if you're going to do it, you have to do it, and you have to be serious about it. And if you are, you absolutely can have success.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and it is, can a manufacturer dictate to distributors that they cannot sell to any third-party marketplace sellers?
Yes. Yes, you absolutely can. I mean, that's a critical aspect of being able to run a successful map program. I mean, Lori, I sent you a link to a white paper we did called The Winning Strategy for Map Success. I mean, it's, an extremely comprehensive that lays all this out for, the listeners can get that. You feel free to distribute it to them. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to, as a manufacturer, to know and have approved everybody that's selling your products online, whether that's a national retailer selling on its own website or somebody buying through distribution. You need to be able to say, yes, you can sell there, or no, you can't. And if a distributor is working with you, one of the key things you want in your distributor policy is you will only sell to authorized resellers. And that is somebody who's gotten our policy that says no marketplace sales without our express permission. So that is a key sort of, kind of to Taylor's point, the whole strategy behind this is so much more than just a map policy, because the audience is kind of zeroing in very quickly on what is disruptive at the end of the day to best intentions on map. And so that is a very key component of that.
Okay, I'm going to throw in one more question. We have so many questions we're not going to be able to get to. I'm going to try to share them with the panelists, and maybe we can get them, we'll deal with it in some way editorially, or perhaps in a future webinar. Is it legal to just disregard a map policy and tell the retailers we will only fund in terms of rebates, which hits tiered specific margin thresholds that incentivize hitting a specific retail? Sorry, that's how the question is asked.
Yeah, I'm not following that question.
Okay.
If somebody can, feel free to email that to me if you'd like.
Okay. All right, I think that's really what we have time for. A few more points that we want to make, that these folks are taking their show on the road, literally, to a SEMPA Roadshow training, and these are the dates: May, June, July, and August. Lester, can you tell me, can anyone sign up for a SEMPA Roadshow program, even if they're not a member of SEMPA?
Yes, you can. We're going to be in Jacksonville on the 6th of May, the 10th, as you can see there in Chattanooga. We'll be in Raleigh, North Carolina on the 15th of July, and the 5th of August we'll be in Houston, Texas. Anyone that is interested in wanting to know and educate themselves about what Ed and I as a manufacturer, what we have done toward map policy, we have a round table that will be these locations, along with several other education opportunities during that day. Those are all Sunday dates. We encourage stores, independent and chain stores, to send their people to these education events. You'll be very, very much pleased with what you learn and be able to interact personally, because we'll be there in person.
Thank you. Okay. Once again, here's the contact information for our panelists. These slides will be put online, and we will also have a recording of this webinar. They have agreed to allow us to, give their information so that you can ask follow-up questions if you have any. And, we thank them very much for that. We only have technically a minute left of official time, but I would like to give each one of you an opportunity to make one quick closing comment. Ed?
Well, my closing comment would be, I truly love this industry with the bottom of my heart, and it's not just about money. That's why we're funding something that has no potential profits to it. I so encourage people to know that we can't let this industry die. We have gone round and round for 50, 70 or 80 years. We've helped millions of people, and we have to armor ourselves against the forces that want to bring us down.
Okay, Chase?
Thank you. In closing, really, it's just retailers really need to start understanding that if they're not close in price, they're going to lose customers. Map, really Amazon sets the pricing. So whatever Amazon has it as, that's the new MSRP. So that's why MAP is such a big issue. It gives us that buffer zone. Selling stuff for MSRP while it's 50% off in your store does a huge disservice to your customers. They go home and see that, and they have a lot of distrust for you. So really, this is why it's so very important to see these brands get a MAP policy, because MAP is going to kind of become the new retail, unspoken at least. But really,
okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Taylor?
Yeah,
I
do. I've had the unique perspective of seeing this kind of MAP issue unfold from a retailer standpoint and from a brand agency and e-commerce standpoint over the past several years. And I can just, if I could implore manufacturers to take action and support your brick and mortar retailers, because the ones that have implemented strong policies and strategies, I think have really experienced a lot of success over the past several years.
Okay, Lester.
I just want to say that it is a privilege to be able to serve in this industry, even as a manufacturer that has been around since 1969. We believe that the future of this industry hinges on this MAP policy and on independent natural product retailers. We have to support them, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're association, or even from a legal standpoint. We have to support these independent natural product retailers. And that is my passion. That's what I intend to do for the rest of my career.
Thank you. Daren, anything you'd like to say in summation?
Yeah, I guess I would just say, as a brand, don't set yourself up to fail on MAP out of the gates. Be thoughtful about your strategy, consult with experts so that you can learn best practices and make sure that you're legally compliant, because there are really a ton of pitfalls easy to be victim of out there in this world. So good luck.
Okay. Here are some resources for you to delve into this more thoroughly. And of course, WholeFoodsMagazine.com will be continuing to cover this important issue. I want to thank all of you for participating, our panelists, especially Buried Treasure for making this possible. Thank you to all the attendees for your thoughtful questions and for your attention. And we will definitely be following up with some more coverage of this issue. The webinar will be put online in a few days, and you will be getting an email. I'll be happy to send out the white paper that Daren referred to. And that's it from all of us. Have a great day and good luck.